I'd like to welcome everyone to for taking the time to join us this evening. My name is James Gambrell. I'm your public participation specialist with DTSC. This meeting is part of the public comment period that started on November 22nd, will end on January 12th for the former Marchant Whitney updated feasibility study draft remedial action plan, or FS draft. By participating in this meeting, you agree to be recorded. This meeting will become part of the public record. It will be my pleasure to introduce you to your DTSC project team. I've already introduced myself, James Gambrell, your public participation specialist. I'd like to introduce Marcus Simpson, the public participation supervisor.
Thank you, James. Hey, folks, I appreciate you for joining us tonight. Welcome.
Thank you. And Tom Price, your project manager.
Yes, James, thank you for introducing me. Thank you. Welcome to the meeting.
Thank you. And Julie Pettijohn, your branch chief in the Berkeley office.
Hi, folks. Thanks for joining us tonight.
And we have, do we have Jerry Ahrens here tonight? And Jerry wasn't able to join us, so we have Dr. Uta Hellman-Bloomberg, and we have Dr. Brian Endlich.
Good evening, everybody.
Thank you. Allow me to present tonight's agenda. We will start with the, we've already started with the welcome and introductions. We're going to go over with the DTSC, Department of Toxic Substances Control overview, and then a presentation on the background and status of the current site remediation. This will lead to the proposed remediation plan and next steps. Finishing with input from you, the community. We will do our best to ensure everyone has an opportunity to provide comments before the meeting is concluded. In the next slides, I will go over instructions on how to participate at the end and ask questions. Now, Tom Price, your project manager, will start the presentation.
Thank you, James. Hello again. I'm Tom Price. I'm with DTSC. I am the project manager for this site. On the left side of this view, the responsible party is shown for the project, the successor agency, which owns the property and is the legal entity with the city of Emeryville, which replaced the former redevelopment agency. On the right side here, the consultant working on the project for the successor agency is EKI Environment and Water Incorporated, who prepared the draft cleanup plan that we'll be discussing tonight. Craig Communications is also involved with public communications for this project. For example, they sent out the flyer announcing the public comment period on the draft cleanup plan and this public meeting. The site location of the former Marchant Whitney site is shown here in the city of Emeryville. Notice the site is on the east side of Highway 580, just south of Powell Street. Next slide, please. This is a view of the site from Horton Street. Some of you may be familiar with this view if you've driven by the site recently. The address is 5679 Horton Street in Emeryville, and the site is approximately 1.75 acres in size and includes a building and exterior paved parking areas. Next slide, please. The first thing I want to discuss is why we are here. This site has a history of over 80 years of industrial manufacturing. Those operations released hazardous substances to the soil and the groundwater at the site. The purpose of this meeting is to provide information about the contamination and provide information about what the successor agency has proposed to do to clean it up. DTSC is soliciting public comments on a proposed cleanup plan. This former industrial property released chemicals including chlorinated solvents, metals, and fuels. Those contaminants have concerns for human health. DTSC wants to ensure that the site is properly cleaned up. Our job is to ensure that the cleanup plan is protective of the community and also protective of future occupants of the site. Over the last 10 years, investigations have defined the extent of contamination of soil, in soil and groundwater. That investigation data provides the basis for the proposed cleanup plan. Also, a draft cleanup plan was prepared about 5 years ago by 2017. However, there was a delay due to a lack of funding at that time. The funding is now available to start the cleanup. The estimated cost of the cleanup under the proposed plan is $30 to $40 million for the active cleanup phase and up to $50 to $80 million, including long-term monitoring and operations and maintenance. It's a big project. Next slide, please. The site is shown here in blue. Again, the location is 5679 Horton Street in Emeryville. I want to point out a couple of landmarks for anyone who may be unfamiliar with the area. At the top of this view is Powell Street. The site is located about 1 block south of the Powell Street overpass, which goes over the railroad. As you can see here to the left of the site, the railroad is shown adjacent to the site on the left. On this view, also on the left side, is the Bay Street Mall. Along Bay Street, you can see Christie Avenue and the Shellmount Street, which is a major local destination for entertainment and shopping. And there's a movie theater there and shops on the ground level, and there are residential units above the shops. Okay, I want to take a few minutes to discuss the site history. For the early 1900s to the 1990s, the site was used for manufacturing and research. The Marchant Calculating Machine Company manufactured calculators at the site in the early years. The Marchant Whitney, or I should say the Whitney Research Tool Company constructed the current building at the site in the 1960s and manufactured industrial valves there. The property was acquired by the Redevelopment Agency in 1999, and the city of Emeryville occupied the site as a corporate yard for over 10 years until indoor air testing in the building showed high levels of fumes from chlorinated solvents. For that reason, since 2012, the building at the site has been left vacant because it is not safe to occupy. DTSC issued an order for site cleanup in 2020, and that was just over 2 years ago. In response, the successor agency hired the consultant, EKI, to prepare a proposed cleanup plan. DTSC staff, including the project manager, that's me, a senior engineering geologist, and a senior toxicologist, thoroughly reviewed and approved the proposed plan. Now, DTSC wants your input on the proposed cleanup plan, which I will provide more details on in the upcoming slides. A community survey was sent out to the neighborhood last summer, and we received only 2 comments. One inquired about the health concerns caused by the site at a location 1/2 mile away from the site, for which we do not have concerns. And another question was received regarding groundwater cleanup at the site, which I will discuss later in this presentation. You will have the opportunity during this meeting to ask questions of our panelists. We will try to answer your questions tonight in real time. If we can't answer your questions tonight, we will provide answers in writing to you later. The comment period extends for 4 more weeks until January 12th. At the end of this presentation, we will share information about ways that you may contact us to submit comments after tonight. Next slide, please. Now I will discuss some technical aspects about how environmental contamination occurs at a site like this. This figure shows how contamination happens and how it moves through the soil, groundwater, soil vapor, and indoor air, like fumes in the air. Fumes can evaporate from what we call source areas, which are like reservoirs for contaminants. Those sources can occur in soil, groundwater, and soil vapor. Removal of those source areas is a goal of cleanup to prevent the fumes from being generated and causing exposures. In this diagram, the red circles in the building represent the location where the toxic chemicals were released. Those were primarily chemical solvents that were used in the manufacturing processes to clean equipment and materials. In the early days, those releases occurred through carelessness mostly. Today, manufacturers are much more careful when handling hazardous substances because today the hazards associated with those compounds are better understood, and modern regulations also require more careful handling. TCE is short for trichloroethylene, which is the main contaminant at the site. Other contaminants include hydrocarbons and metals, which are of lesser concern at the site, but will also be cleaned up. TCE moves very easily in the environment, migrating from soil to shallow groundwater, as shown here by the downward arrows. Impacting those red arrows represent the chemicals impacting the groundwater, shown in blue at the bottom of this figure. Above the groundwater zone, soil and soil vapor zones are shown, which may act as source areas for contaminant transport into utility corridors. For example, water lines, sewer lines, natural gas lines, or even cable conduits. Next slide, please. This figure shows how vapor intrusion of fumes and chemicals can occur. Toward the bottom of this diagram, the groundwater contamination source shows squiggly arrows pointing up, which represents soil vapors or fumes migrating up toward the building. Fumes can enter a building through cracks in the concrete or through utility lines. For example, again, water lines, sewer lines, natural gas lines, or even cable conduits. If fumes enter a building like shown here, the concentrations can exceed indoor air quality standards, which is unsafe. Next slide, please. A risk assessment for this site was performed. That is included in the supporting documentation. The risk assessment informs us how much cleanup is needed at the site to make it safe. And the proposed cleanup level was tailored to the proposed future use of the site. In this case, the proposed cleanup level is proposed for future commercial or industrial usage. Next slide, please. The feasibility study and draft remedial action plan is what we call a remedy selection document. In other words, a number of alternatives for the proposed remedy or cleanup were considered. Each alternative for cleanup was ranked depending on how well it met cleanup objectives. In this case, a very thorough cleanup approach was selected as the best alternative. Now I will briefly discuss the series of investigations that were conducted at the site and vicinity over the last 10 years. The photograph here shows a type of drilling machine which collects samples. Various types of tools are used to collect soil samples, groundwater samples, and soil vapor samples. Incidentally, doing that kind of work is how I actually got my start in this business. The contaminants at the site include fuel, oils, cadmium. The chlorinated solvents I discussed earlier are also called volatile organic compounds, or VOCs for short, and include trichloroethylene or TCE, dichloroethylenes or DCEs, and vinyl chloride. Those compounds, DCEs and vinyl chloride, are associated with biodegradation products from the main contaminant, TCE. The site itself is where most of the contamination is located. However, low levels of TCE has also migrated with groundwater under the railroad tracks toward the west and has been detected at low levels in groundwater at the Bay Street Mall. Testing of samples at the Bay Street Mall showed only low levels of TCE, which is of lesser concern for vapor intrusion than the higher concentrations observed at the site itself. Next slide, please. Next, I'll briefly go over the elements of the proposed remedy, or what's called the cleanup plan. First, the on-site building will be demolished to allow for other cleanup operations to proceed most efficiently. Soil will be excavated across the entire site to a depth of 5 foot and to a depth of 10 foot in a hotspot location. A hotspot location is where high concentrations of chemical were observed. The site will be capped with hardscape, whether asphalt or concrete. Then a multiple phase extraction system will be installed for extraction of both groundwater and soil vapors or fumes. The extraction system will feature heating elements or probes that are installed into the ground. The probes will heat up the subsurface to help evaporate the TCE and provide enhanced removal of the fumes. If additional cleanup of groundwater is needed, biological amendments may be injected into the groundwater. However, development of that phase would depend on the results of a pilot study or effectiveness evaluation. This diagram shows how the sources of contamination can be removed under the proposed cleanup plan for a site like this. Toward the top left side, note that the building is proposed to be demolished. So this figure assumes the building is already gone. That will help the other cleanup activities proceed efficiently. At the top of the diagram and on the legend, the soil unit is shown here in brown. That is proposed to be excavated and trucked away for landfilling. Below that, the pink area shows a subsurface zone where the soil vapors are extracted from. And the red color near the bottom shows the zone where contaminated groundwater can be extracted from. The blue color at the bottom represents groundwater. On the right side of this view, the vertical lines are shown that represent groundwater and soil vapor extraction wells. The extraction is aided by heat probes, which help to evaporate the contaminants. A heat probe is shown as a vertical line near the center of this diagram. The extracted vapors and contaminated groundwater would be treated or cleaned prior to venting or discharge under appropriate permits. Next slide, please. Other elements of the proposed plan include monitoring the effectiveness of the cleanup. Soil vapor or fumes will be monitored, and precautions for planned developments will ensure that vapor intrusion is prevented. Various technologies can be employed to accomplish this, including soil vapor monitoring probes, vapor intrusion, mitigation systems, for example, vapor barriers, and piping with soil venting systems. Groundwater is also planned for monitoring. Future development of the site will be restricted with the land use covenant, which will be attached to the deed of the property. Periodic reviews will also be required, for example, like annual monitoring and 5-year reviews. This is a conceptual figure for the proposed cleanup. This figure is a little busy with the various colored lines, but I want to point out that the yellow lines show the site perimeter. The legend on the right side shows symbols for the different types of wells associated with the site cleanup. Some are regular groundwater monitoring wells. Others are part of the proposed extraction system. As I mentioned before, the entire site will be excavated to the 5-foot depth. And the square area on the upper right side is the hotspot area I mentioned. And that will be excavated to the 10-foot depth. The tan hatched area in the center of the site is where the heat probes will be installed as part of the extraction system. It is focused on cleaning up the most contaminated area of the site. Next slide, please. Noise and air monitoring will be conducted during the field work. Air testing results for dust and VOCs will be posted on DTSC's public website on a weekly basis. That way, the community can access the air monitoring data and be assured that appropriate controls are effective. Also, cultural resources monitoring will be conducted since this site is near the historical shell mound area of Emeryville, where Native American artifacts are present. During excavations, monitoring for artifacts will be performed. The monitoring will be performed by a local tribe that expressed interest in this project. The image at the upper left shows a truck crossing a tire cleaning grid that prevents mud and debris from being carried onto roadways, similar to one that will be employed during fieldwork. The image on the lower left shows an air monitoring device similar to monitors which will be used to monitor dust concentration during fieldwork. The image on the lower right shows a tent structure similar to one that will be used to control vapors during the hotspot excavation. Air blowers will maintain a negative air pressure inside the tent during excavation of the hotspot, and the air will be filtered prior to venting. Next slide, please. This project has a transportation plan which specifies the level of anticipated truck traffic and traffic routes. Up to 40 trucks may enter and exit the site per hour, and up to 160 trips per day for 20 days is anticipated. Those 20 days of heavy traffic are anticipated to be spread out over approximately 1.5 months during the duration of the excavation phase. Truck loads will be tarped, tires cleaned, and each truck will be inspected prior to leaving the site. Flaggers will be made available to direct vehicle and pedestrian traffic. Truck idling times will be minimized. Next slide, please. Communications with the public during field work is very important to DTSC. Work notices will be distributed prior to the various phases of field work to keep the public informed. Also, a large sign will be placed at the entrance of the site. The sign will have phone numbers of who to call if a community member wants to make a complaint. Phone numbers on the sign will be for DTSC, my direct line, the consultant EKI, and the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. After this meeting, DTSC will consider all comments and questions. DTSC will provide a written response and what we call a responsiveness summary. If needed, changes may be made to the cleanup plan to address community comments or questions prior to approval. Upon approval of the cleanup plan, DTSC is required to submit paperwork under the California Environmental Quality Act. Those filings will include a notice of determination and what is called a mitigated negative declaration to the Governor's Office of Planning and Budget. The reason it is called a mitigated negative declaration is that this project has the potential to cause environmental impacts. However, those potential impacts are planned to be properly mitigated according to the cleanup plan. This slide shows the tentative schedule for next steps. We anticipate that the responsiveness summary to answer your questions and comments will be completed early next year. The final feasibility study remedial action plan is anticipated to be approved in the spring of 2023. Prior to field work, work notices will be distributed to the surrounding community. The remediation field work is anticipated to begin during the summer of 2023. To show the effectiveness of the cleanup, a remedial action completion report will be prepared. The schedule for that is TBA, to be announced, because it may take 2 to 3 years before the active phase of the cleanup is completed and before the report can be finalized. This concludes my presentation. I'll turn it back to James now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tom, for that presentation. Just want to remind everyone that the public comment period runs from November 22nd to January 12th, 2023. Project question will be addressed at tonight's meeting. Community members can also provide formal public comments via verbal comments during a portion of tonight's meeting, email, mail, or phone call. You can also send comments to Tom Price at DTSC, Project Manager, 700 Hines Avenue, Berkeley, California, 94710. He can be reached at area code 510-540-3811 or thomas.price@dtsc.ca.gov. All comments received will be addressed in a responsive summary document after the close of the comment period, which again is January 12th, 2023. Next slide, please. You can also view the documents at any of the information repositories. The Oakland Public Library Golden Gate Branch at 5606 San Pablo Avenue. That's located in the city of Emeryville, 94608. Call for hours at 510-597-5023. Also at the Emeryville City Hall at 1333 Park Avenue. Also in the city of Emeryville, 94608. Call and ask to speak with City Clerk April Richardson at 510-596-4372. And lastly, at the DTSC Berkeley office, Department of Toxic Substances Control Berkeley office at 700 Hines Avenue. And that's in Berkeley, California, 94710. And for hours, please call 510-597-5023. Online, you can access the documents at EnviroStore at www.envirostore.dtsc.ca.gov/public. Enter Marchant Whitney and select from the drop-down menu. If you click on the Community Involvement tab, you'll be able to review the documents. Next slide, please. And if you need help or need more information, please feel free to reach out to the DTSC staff. Tom Price, your project manager at 510-540-3811, thomas.price@dtsc.ca.gov, or myself, James Gambrell, your public participation specialist at 510-529-7199. You can also reach me toll free at 866-495-5651 or james.gambrell@dtsc.ca.gov. Slide 31, please. We're moving into the question portion of tonight's presentation. There are 3 different ways to participate: Zoom audio, text only, or dialing in by phone. On the next slide, it will give us a graphic, and I'll explain how to use those once again. Next slide, please. Those joining on your computer, you'll see the raise hand and Q&A icons in the toolbar at the bottom of the screen. You may need to hover your mouse or pointer at the bottom for the controls to appear. Using your keyboard shortcut, you can press Alt-Y to raise your hand. If you're using the Zoom app on your smartphone, the icons will be in the toolbar as well. But you may need to click on the More button if your smaller screen does not show the icons. If you're dialing in by phone, you can press *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute. When called upon, I will announce the last 3 digits of your phone number to let you know it's your turn to speak. Next slide, please. I'll now begin taking questions or comments. And let's take a look and see if we have any questions or comments. And if you could please move to the next slide so we have the perfect. All right. I'm checking see if we have any raised hands. And I do not see any raised hands at this time. I'll check the phone lines and see if anyone has hit the *6 to raise their hand. I do not see anyone. And in the question and answer, I do not have any open questions at this time. So tonight's your time to participate and have input, questions, comments with your DTSC team. So please feel free to raise your hand, or you can type your question in the Q&A section, and I'll read that out loud. Or you can press *6 to raise your hand. Or *9, sorry, *9 to raise your hand. We'll give them another minute or so. Give attendees time to formulate any questions they may have. So please take your time. And also remember, if you have a question that you have later on, you can feel free to reach out to myself or Tom Price via email, mail, or telephone. We'd be more than happy to answer your question. And it looks like I still do not have any raised hands. And let's see if we have any question and answers. I do not see. And okay. Let's go ahead and move to the last and final slide. Thank you. I'd like to thank everyone for taking time out of their busy day to join us tonight. Please have a safe night, and thank you for joining us, and have a happy holidays.